Hi and welcome to my channel Blossom Moon Quilts. My name's Jenny and I'm excited to share with you another video about my latest quilt project, the gallery wall quilt. I started this quilt about 6 months ago and I have shared my progress in other videos, so I will link those in the description for you if you'd like to see how it all began. Here's a very quick recap of the beginnings of this quilt. I was inspired to make it in the summer months when the garden was full of gorgeous flowers. I wanted to capture the mood of a summer garden filled with blooms. The quilt started off in a very different form as I experimented with the placement of lots of different fabrics and eventually evolved into what I now call my shabby chic gallery wall quilt. The quilt is now ready for the next stages, but before I talk you through my plans, let's pick up where I left off last time. In the last video, I'd started attaching the picture frames to the backing fabric with fusible webbing, and I was using a blanket stitch to applique around the edges. I was really struggling to get a neat result despite practicing beforehand. Luckily, with a few changes, including some good advice from a viewer in the comments to use an open toe foot, I managed to improve and get the majority stitched down. So I've hung the quilt on my design wall and I'm going to go and iron the last picture frame on and then do the final blanket stitch around it. This is my final picture to sew on, and then the whole quilt top is complete. So in the end I managed to get my blanket stitch nice and neat. I just simply changed the needle and went at a very consistent slow speed, and that seemed to do the trick. So it looks much neater, and all of the majority of the picture frames now have got nice neat stitches. I'm not going to bother going back to the first couple. They'll do, nobody will notice. This quilt's just for me, so I really want to crack on with the next stage now. So you can see in some places that the stitches are quite tight and there's a tiny bit of puckering. So what I'm going to do is iron this now and sort of smooth it all out and help to relax the stitches. Actually, you can see that does a really good job. I've got some little threads that I need to snip off. So after steam ironing this whole quilt top, I've rehung it back up so that I can just double check and see what it looks like. And I think the steam did a really good job of removing all of those puckers. It's relaxed everything and it's now lying really nice and flat against this design wall. So that was a step that was definitely worth doing. So let me share with you my quilting designs for this quilt top. Now I want this to read as an actual gallery wall. So I've decided against doing an overall quilt design. I just don't think that would enhance this quilt in any way whatsoever. So what I've decided to do is to quilt around each frame. So I'm going to go around the blanket stitch here. And then I'm also going to quilt round the inner border. And then because these frames are already kind of geometric, I want to add some softness. So the design within the border is going to be some sort of sweeping curves. And I'm going to go and look at some actual picture frames to get some inspiration for those. And for the quilting of the actual pictures, I'm a big fan of doing outline quilting, and I've done that on a previous quilt, which I will show you now. But for this quilt, I think that could be too much, because in some of the pictures, like this one, for example, there's just so much detail that it would just be far too much. I don't know, get very complicated. So I think I might just go for an overall free motion design, maybe some floral design. I think that would look quite pretty. And then when it comes to the background fabric, which is my wallpaper, If you can see here, there are 2 lines. So I'm either going to do some straight line stitching to sort of enhance this stripe design, or I'm going to choose a decorative stitch. And on my embroidery machine, I've got a floral stitch, which could look quite nice. I'm going to try that out and on another piece of fabric before I apply it to this one and see how that looks. So I've got a couple of different options for the background fabric. So let's head now to the shops and go and look at some different picture frames for some inspiration. Well, I don't know about you, but I always get really nervous when I get to this quilting stage. I think after I've worked on the quilt top for so long and tried to get it as perfect as possible, it's really daunting to then take it to the machine and think that I could make a mistake. So that's why I'm doing so much research about the quilt design and carefully considering how I go about it based on my skill level. So as well as looking at the picture frames for some inspiration for quilt designs, I've also come across this book by an author and quilter called Linda Mayshow. She now publishes under the name Linda Seward, if you want to find her work. And this book is full of design templates, so this is a fantastic resource, which I will share with you now. I'd like to just read you out this introduction that Linda has in this book, because as I'm working on this project, these words really resonate with me. So she says, "Quilting is addictive. It is not the kind of addiction that will result in bodily harm, except perhaps sore fingertips, but it is the kind of addiction that creates an unquenchable thirst for new patterns, fabrics, notions and books. And this addiction, when well fueled by the items just mentioned, will release creative impulses and liberate previously hidden talents. The process of selecting a pattern, picking a colour scheme, deciding upon fabrics, cutting, sewing and quilting is one of the best methods of relaxation available today, as it was in the past. Quilting is a completely satisfying form of needlework because it combines so many skills and talents that meld to create a useful and cherished work." So this book's a fantastic resource for quilting designs and patterns, and she's got some really useful instructions on how to transfer the patterns to the fabric. So I'm going to have a read through that to make sure that I'm doing everything correctly. I'm just checking to see whether this template would actually fit within my borders, and it looks like it could be the correct size, so I'm going to keep that in mind. It's a definite option. The other considerations for this quilt are the backing fabric, the binding, the quilting thread and the wadding. So I'll show you the options that I've got now. Now, I did say in a previous video that I was only going to use pre-loved or second-hand materials in this quilt, but this is the only wadding that I've currently got. It's fairly new. I bought it about a year ago. It's a twin size and it's by the brand So Easy. It's 80% cotton, 20% polyester. It just seems pointless to me to go out and try and find something new when I've already got this at home. And I'm going to make use of what I've got. It's a really lovely quality. I don't think it's a very thick wadding, but it's really soft and I think it's got a nice drape, which is the feel that I want for this quilt. So this is the thread that I was originally using for the blanket stitch to applique around the picture frames. Now this is one of those satin embroidery threads and I don't think it's particularly strong, so I don't think it's going to hold up to the machine quilting. So I have been to the shops and found a very similar shade. And this is a sew-all thread. I got some advice from the lady in the shop and explained that lots of the quilt is made up of poly cotton blends. So rather than go for the 100% cotton quilting thread, she advised to use this one instead. And I think the shades are pretty similar. So yeah, I'm pleased that I've managed to find those. I've also got a couple of other thread options. I've got this very pretty pink which matches the background wallpaper fabric, and then I have these sort of off-white, antique white colours which could be good if I'm going to be stitching down the straight line, and that's kind of an off-white colour. So this is the fabric that I used for the picture frames, and I'd love to use this for the binding but also the backing if there is enough. Now I'm not sure if there is, so I'm going to double check. I'm going to put the quilt top on the bed and then put this on top and see how much there is. If there isn't enough to cut out the binding strips separately, what I might do is the method where you self-bind and flip the fabric over. That's a possibility. But I do have a couple of other options. I bought this fabric yesterday from a charity shop, and this is a vintage St. Michael's flat sheet, and this cost me just £3 I think, so it's a real bargain. But I think it will match the theme and the look of my quilt, so that's a good possibility. This also seems to go quite well with it. And then the other thing that I have is a duvet cover, and this has got a lovely soft purple design. It's a stripe on the back, so I could use either side, and there's plenty of fabric, and this is quite nice and faded and has a very soft look, so this would tie in with the very vintage feel that I want to create. Well, I started off making this video with firm plans to get this quilt layered up into a quilt sandwich, and that has all gone by the by. The more research I do for this quilt, the more questions and options arise. I was originally planning to maintain the same quilting pattern for every picture frame, mainly because the quilt has a lot to look at, and I think that would calm things down and give the eyes a place to rest. But now I'm wondering whether some variation across the frames would be more realistic of a gallery picture wall and be more interesting to look at. This is the frame that I like the most. It's got some beautiful detail, and the inner border could be achieved with some decorative stitches. I'm not sure how easy the other details would be to achieve. I've been wondering whether to try and create more texture and try to replicate the floral relief designs by adding some embroidery and then quilting around the outlines. This is my embroidery machine, and I was really lucky to have been given this to me as a gift from my mum. I've only used it a couple of times with her help, so I'm really not sure what I'm doing. So I think I'm going to have to look through this instruction manual. But first of all, I want to show you the decorative stitches that could be useful in the quilting of the picture frames. There's lots of choice, and there's more choice than I've got on my sewing machine. So here you can see there's some florals, and some of them are very pretty, and they could be very useful going around the inner side of the picture frames to replicate the picture frames that I found in the shops. So I'm going to just have a practice I'm going to get my quilt sandwich together and yeah, let's have a look. I'm going to try out my new thread to see how this looks in a decorative stitch. I finally figured out how to get this machine set up. I realised that you actually have to take the embroidery unit off before you can do any actual proper sewing on this machine. It's taken me about an hour to figure this out, but I've got there eventually. And now I've got it all threaded up and I've got my quilt sandwich, so I'm going to have a look at some of these lovely decorative stitches. Right, so the machine is set to this card here, so I can choose any of these stitches. There's lots of beautiful ones here, but I think I might try with number 38 because that could be an excellent choice for the border on the inner part of the picture frame. Let's see. That's absolutely beautiful. I really love that, and it looks like it could replicate the frames that I've looked at in the shops. And on the back it's also beautiful and neat. So that's definitely an option. I would need to figure out how to stop and go around the corner. That's something I need to tackle. So I've had an experiment with the machine, and I've got here now a lovely sample of the different decorative stitches. They're all gorgeous. So I'm going to have some tough decisions to make, and I'm going to still have to decide whether to use the same stitch for every frame or have some variation. But very, very happy with the way that lots of these have turned out. So I thought I'd bring it to my quilt and just perhaps see if I think that they would work. That's really gorgeous. I've just lined that up and I can see that working. Very, very nice. This vine stitch is also really gorgeous. This could be another definite option. This floral stitch here could be great for the actual picture, but I'm not sure how I could get this to meander. I don't really want straight lines within the pictures, so that's something else I'm going to have a trial of. I want to have a go of stitching out Linda Seward's design here. So I've got this tracing board and I'm going to put my fabric over the top, see if it's possible to see it and trace over it, and then take it to the machine and see what that looks like. Nicely. So next for the quilt sandwich and stitching. Well, this isn't my best stitching ever. I think I got a bit too excited about getting this done, but let's go and have a look at it on the design wall. Actually, this could be really nice. Now that I've seen this up against the picture frame, this is making me think that using different designs for each picture frame could be the way to go. I think it'd be much more interesting, and then I can include this one as sort of a nice and simple classic design. Well, I think I'm going to call it a day for this video. I've had so much fun up in my sewing room that there's a whole pile of housework for me to go and sort out. So I hope you've enjoyed this video and will join me next time for more designing, stitching and quilting. Thanks so much for joining me. See you soon. Bye.